Welcome back to the SnackWalls podcast. I'm Mike Roberts, your host, and we're here to talk about increasing and maintaining diversity in tech beyond the perks. While companies think they can lure people in with unlimited PTO and dogs in the office, we're here to talk about how you keep them. Hey, I'm going to throw it over to our special guest today. In a few sentences, can you tell us who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure. I am Kim Crowder. I am the founder and CEO of Kim Crowder Consulting. And what I do is help organizations embed diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism into their workplace DNA. So what that means is we do consulting, we do training, we do strategy. We really help organizations understand what this is beyond this idea of let's just get people who are diverse here. How do you keep them? How do you make them feel included? How do you really impact their mental and intelligence for innovation? And really, how do you create an environment that is equitable for all?
All right. I love that answer, although I'm a little jealous and I feel like maybe you should be hosting this show, not me. So I'm going to try and keep my job today. But yeah, all of those things I love hearing. So I think you are definitely the person that we need to have on this program. And I'll just kick it off. I ask the same questions to everybody. So we'll start with the first one is I'm hearing from some leaders in tech that finding diverse talent is a challenge. What are your thoughts?
Okay. I'm going to give probably a different answer than what you've heard.
Okay.
Because organizations say, or industries say, it's a challenge to find XYZ. But the question is really, has your industry, if you want to look at it this way, instead of saying it is a challenge, two things. One, has your industry made it challenging? So how do you switch that over so that you are taking ownership of the challenges there? How do you take responsibility of that and say, maybe we're an industry or maybe we're an environment that is not inclusive. Maybe we haven't involved people in the conversation in order to move this forward. So that's the first part. The second part is then start to think then how, if tech is, in tech, we think of people being the greatest thinkers, right? Always innovating. Why then does that innovation stop here? Why does it then become challenge instead of let's innovate around this? Why is that language typically different, right? What that speaks to is this idea of we don't have the answers. And so if you don't have the answers, what do you do in tech? You always find it, you figure it out, you workshop it till you get it. And so my recommendation for the tech world is to start to be really honest about the environment that has been created around this. And then also, if you don't have the answers, because sometimes in tech, you may not have the answers, then how do you find the folks who do? And how do you really, really start to put funding and time into these initiatives so that you can move it forward?
So many nuggets there. I'll just start with the fact that you do have a unique take in that you're like the way companies, I think, envision this is a very me centric, like, what do we do? What are we responsible, et cetera? And to your point, it really does need to be like everybody together collectively needs to make a decision to make a shift, adjustment, whatever you want to call it, to create a more inclusive environment and put some of that work into that pipeline, building it from multiple sources, all that kind of good stuff. So I love that take of it's just not an individual company. It is the entire industry that needs to just like, we got to adjust as a group.
Right.
That's tough. That is because now you got the inertia of not just a big old company that doesn't want to change, but a big old industry that might not be receptive to changing. But to your point on that second part, it's like you're missing the opportunity to use what you do best, which is innovate. And like, this is the machine of the American economy, is like how we get in there and create new things and solutions to really hard problems. Like that's what we're good at, right? Going to the Mars and like all these like big, huge, difficult challenges that we just like chop it up into pieces. And then we work collectively to try and find solutions to each of those. So
right.
Love it.
Let me say this one thing too. Also, to make sure that as organizations are doing this, that you define what diversity looks like, what equity looks like, what inclusion looks like, what anti-racism looks like. Instead of creating these general themes around what each of these are, we want to be more diverse. Awesome. But what does that look like? And also, when we start talking about diversity and we count it as such, are we talking about diversity in context of the industry or the rest of the world? And so sometimes organizations are like, we are diverse, right? We do have employees that are considered people of color, but which are those groups? And is in that, are you excluding other groups from being a part of that conversation and a part of that industry as well?
Okay, so I'm just going to name it because right now in tech, there is this perception that like, well, we are quite diverse because we have a lot of Asian
Right.
folks, and it's like, yeah, but okay, name another group that you have a lot of, and so it's like it's where it stops. So I feel like, to your point, it is great to have lots of white cisgender males and Asian, both women and men, but where are the rest of the women? And are all of the women in the product side of the business and not on the engineering side? And why is that? Why are a lot of women starting CS degrees but not completing CS degrees?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those like dynamics that come into play? And so love the fact that like, but I think we also have to name it and just say like, there are some specific groups that folks are okay with saying, hey, we're diverse because we have lots of Asian, we have lots of this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, you're not. Let's call it out and like say that's not enough. That's not sufficient. So.
And here's what we also know. We know that there are plenty of Black women who are in this space who are having these conversations. Black women in tech is a whole entire group dedicated to this. Mm-hmm. We also know that Arlen Hamilton has wrote a whole entire book about being a VC capitalist, a venture capitalist in this space. Her book is called It's About Damn Time. You all should damn sure read it. And then also Dawn Dickinson is doing some amazing work with her products. There are numerous people who are interested, who are ready. Sometimes it's the connection. I can't find someone who will mentor me in this space. I can't find someone who will take me seriously in this space. We know Nina Molina Munoz. I want to make sure I'm saying her name right. I'm going to look her up. But there are plenty of women, is what I'm saying. There are plenty of people of color who are interested. So that is not the excuse, is what I'm getting at, that can be used anymore to say we just can't find people. It is you are not including people and you are not building those bridges to make relationships with those folks prior to wanting them within your organization. I help organizations understand that you have to build bridges early, and then you start to see that later on. So you start connecting with those schools, you start connecting with those professional associations, so that in that time when you're ready to hire and you're looking to bring people on, you already have something to go back to.
Yeah, so true. So that said, we talked a little bit about like just the approach. What do you think about the push to remove the requirement for CS degrees for many of these software engineering roles?
You know, I think it would be, I think the best way to think about that is, is that creating a major barrier, right? Is that something that is creating a major barrier? Because if it is creating a major barrier, then do get away, get rid of it. Do move that out. Thinking about what is the direct pipeline around that? So really saying, are we missing a whole group of folks who don't feel like they can have access? Is that connected to money? Because it may not be connected to their skill set, right? Especially when we're talking about tech, when certifications are available to anyone who in some way wants to do that, online or in unconventional ways. You can make a lot of money in tech and never really have this formal degree in it. And so providing the space to make it make sense as to why this is really in place. Is this a barrier or is this a bridge? And so if it is a barrier, how do we get rid of it so that we can build a bridge that makes the most sense?
Yeah, I agree. And I think for many folks that are on the recruiting side, their vision is, I want to go on to the campus of these elite schools and hire the best and brightest. And that's not necessarily what's required to get the job done and be really great employees. They set this really high barrier, and then they go to like progressively white institutions. And so it's like you've created all of these artificial barriers that are going to make it really, really difficult for you to achieve the stated purpose or stated goal, which is to go find a diverse workforce to come on board and add value, a workforce that looks and reflects what your customer base looks like. Well, if your customer base is not folks that all went to these elite programs and these elite schools. So to me, I think there's a real big misalignment there between what they say they want to do and the steps that they're taking to solve that problem. But
right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
To your point, I like removing barriers and sort of making that decision. Is it a bridge or barrier? That I think is phenomenal.
And I want to go back real quick to the title of that book, Leapfrog. That is Natalie Molina Nino. So I want to make sure that I say her name correctly. She's fabulous.
Got it. We're going to throw that in the show notes too, so folks can find that link really quickly. So do you think an apprenticeship pattern would work for tech roles?
Yes and yes. But here's how, the only way that it works, right, is that people have access to being apprenticed, who are from backgrounds who may not have those opportunities. Because what we're really talking about is opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Who gets it and who doesn't. And what we know is that by nature, we associate with who we feel like we most look like, who we feel like we most connect with, who we most understand. And so if that apprenticeship only works in a way where we're still having mostly cisgendered white men be apprenticed on a regular basis. And it's so funny you're saying this because I'm literally working on a newsletter around apprenticeship and mentorship just in general. But let me give you an example of why this is so important. I'm coming out of the consulting world, coming out of corporate America. I'm working in the consulting world. And I don't really have a ton of mentors or really a ton of people I can look up to. And people are starting to hear about me a bit more. And I had someone recommend me for a position, right? He recommended me for not a position, but a consulting role within an organization. I didn't get the consulting role, but I did send him, when I found out that he had done it, I sent him a thank you. And I also said, can we meet? Because we had never met. This man, we'd never met. And in our conversation, he's a New York Times bestseller, Wall Street Journal bestseller. I said to him, what made you be open to having this conversation with me on a regular, having these conversations on a regular basis? And he said, someone pulled him aside and he said, as a white man, what can I do? So they pulled him aside and said, you need to start mentoring people who you wouldn't normally mentor, who are from diverse backgrounds, particularly Black and brown, and give them as much knowledge and access to your networks as possible. And in that, he said, literally, his words to me I'm working on 2 books. But for you, whenever you need me, I'll show up. I'll share my network with you. I'll share, a ton of information that is kind of behind the veil information. And that's what we need. We need people of privilege to use their privilege in order to move people forward. But until people are willing to do that level of open work and really work from a place of vulnerability in that, then apprenticeship doesn't work. It looks like the same thing as kind of recommendations do, right? Where you recommend people who look just like you or who went to school with you or who your lab partners are, like your roommates, instead of this is someone who I know is absolutely capable, even though I would never cross paths with them on a regular basis, but I know they're capable and I need to do my part in order to open that door.
Yeah, I love that answer. 1,000% agree that it really takes more of that, like making those connections with mentorship, making those connections with getting the right candidates in and putting in more work. I feel like there are some organizations, I'm not going to call anybody out in particular, but I'll just say there are some organizations that are using the apprenticeship pattern as sort of a dog and pony show. It's the best way I'll describe it. Right. And I look at the requirements to get into their apprenticeship program, and I'm like, these are the same requirements that you should be using to just give somebody a job. Exactly. These are not our requirements to help someone that otherwise might not be able to take advantage of this opportunity. What you're basically saying is, in some cases, they're saying you need to have a degree or have graduated from like a boot camp or other program to get into an apprenticeship. If you are doing that right now, if you are an HR person or business leader, D&I, whatever the title is, and you have created or helped to enable an apprenticeship program that works that way, you need to stop. Right. Because that is not how you leverage the apprenticeship pattern to resolve some of these challenges that we have in the ecosystem. And I feel like that is so wrong. And I apologize. Sometimes I have to apologize to people that are like, I just did a coding interview to get into an apprenticeship. I'm like, I feel so bad. And I'm so sorry you had to go through a code challenge to get into an apprenticeship. We're supposed to be talent. And once we identify someone has some raw talent and grit and determination, and we think they have an upside and we think they will be successful, the job is to then create a mechanism to get them into that role and let them learn next to a master and let them absorb everything they can. And to your point, from someone that can provide that mentorship, that guidance, open up doors, and just really leverage that to sort of level the playing field. So the folks that aren't doing that irritates me. But I love the fact that you're folks like you are in that space and now trying to use that apprenticeship pattern to really kind of lay out, okay, here's a tactical way you can approach solving some of these problems.
Because what you're talking about is equity, which is different than this straight apprenticeship. You're talking about equity, and what equity really means is providing the tools that are needed for specific groups to be successful, not here's this level playing field, because we know that that does not exist, that there's no such thing as a level playing field based on systematic racism. It just does not exist. And so what are those things, you know, as far as looking at transferable skill sets that need to be involved, or looking at, you know, thinking about financially or where someone might go to college, and also realizing that some people don't go to these Ivy League institutions because they won't be included there. It's not because they couldn't afford it. It's not because they didn't get in or they weren't smart enough to get in, but they want to go somewhere where they feel valued and heard and supported. And so they may have made another choice to go somewhere else that's a historically Black college or university, which I hate that we even like name it like that, because the other ones are indeed historically white colleges and universities, but we don't call them that aside. But, you know, starting to build some real systems that are equitable instead of here's just what we're going to do and we're going to assume it works for every single case. It is not a fair or equitable way to look at this.
Absolutely. And my point is just, if you're going to do an apprenticeship, do it right. Yes. That's not half step. Like, if you're going to make the effort to create this opportunity, then just make a real opportunity and not just like some half-baked talent pipeline, like recruiting effort. That makes zero sense. So from my perspective, just my one person's opinion, that's all.
Just me, that's it.
Just me. So what advice would you share with someone looking to retain diverse staff? So they've done a good job getting folks in the door. How do you keep them? How do you make them stay?
Yeah. I think the first piece is, and so there is a really great, I wish I could tell you, and I'll send it to you after this so you can put it in, you know, in the notes, in the show notes. There's a really great interview on NPR about psychological safety. And that's a kind of like a what word? But psychological safety means that people of diverse backgrounds feel mentally safe, because what we often think about as far as, you know, racism is like these big overt things, right? Someone has to call you this or say this. But what he explained around psychological safety was what jobs they put him on. Was he, you know, even though he was at the same level of his other coworkers, was he expected to show up early and set up the room for presentation where no one else was, right? What does that say? That you in some way aren't quite at the same level, instead of making folks take turns in doing that kind of work. So creating spaces that, and I have been in those environments where, let's say I come in and I am at the director level and I make a decision that someone didn't like. I remember I had a boss who was always like, they didn't like something you said or did. You need to apologize to them. You need to go to them. It was never, they have the issue, I told them to come talk to you. It was always seen in some way that I had to be the one who was making sure that the relationship was okay. And I was the only woman of color at that executive level. So what's the difference here, right? In the expectation. And so as we start to think about this idea of moving this forward, we really have to make sure that people feel psychologically safe to be their full selves within organizations, that they don't feel like they have to come in and assimilate in order to be able to move forward within the organization, and that they are put put on projects that are going to move them forward, that they aren't created to become the token about, we only talk to them about Black or Latin initiatives, or really, tapping them for things that are only based on their background. And now they have to become this person in the organization who is the spokesperson for everyone in their group, right?
Yeah.
How do we, and we've been there, you're saying, oh yeah, because you've probably been that guy. I've certainly been that woman. And sometimes you self-select, but sometimes you don't, right? It's okay if you self-select, if you want to do that, but to be assumed that role is tokenism. And so really, how do we start building these environments where people feel like they can be their full selves at work as an individual, right? That they are seen as a human person themselves, so that whatever that they have to offer is utilized in an equitable way across the board.
Such a fantastic answer to that question. And I want to add on that I think folks don't recognize and realize how much overhead and work that you're asking someone to do
Yeah.
to code switch and to not just be able to come in and be my authentic self and not have to leave that at the door and then throughout the day figure out how do I talk to this person differently than this other person, because they can't just you just can't be real and feel like it's a safe place for that to happen. So
Right.
that's that inclusion piece, right?
And often, one of the things you said is that the extra overhead, that mental capacity overhead. We
Yeah.
know that the wealth gap and the pay gap is real. So I come to work and do all of that, and I don't get paid equitably, even if that's a part of what I have to do as part of my extra role in the job. And you're asking me to be a subject matter expert on a cultural thing, because that's what that is. But you don't necessarily want to pay me for that, even though I've earned that life experience, I've earned that expertise. I don't want, you don't want to pay people for that. So starting to think about these pieces again as this humanistic part of your employees, all of the things that it takes and all of the grit, the absolute grit, the scrappiness that it takes, frankly, for someone of color to get to a certain place within an organization, to even get into that door, could look a lot different than someone who has had a privilege of being born looking a certain way.
Absolutely. And provides that person the skills and attributes to really excel in some cases at the executive leadership position, and being able to have conversations that can be more dynamic and fluid because they're used to code switching. They're used to being able to very quickly pick up on, okay, this is the direction we need to shift in to make this a positive interaction with this individual. So I feel like a lot of those skills are just undervalued by folks because they just don't recognize it. It's very surface level. They don't get everything that's happening underneath.
Right.
So
I would absolutely agree.
now, who is someone like yourself that you would like to acknowledge and think as a leader should be invited to be a guest on a podcast like this?
Oh, so there are a couple. Dr. Actually, I'll start with Michelle Kim. I don't know if you've heard of Michelle Kim. Michelle Kim runs Awaken. She does a lot with tech. If I'm not mistaken. Also, Dr. Tiffany. I want to say her last name is Jana, Jana. And she is absolutely fabulous. She's been in the game before diversity, equity, and inclusion was like even put together. It's probably called like diversity at some point. And that like she's been doing this forever. These are people who I follow on a regular basis and continuously learn and grow from as well. If you can find Ibram X. Kendi and get him on, you should probably do that. But but also I want to mention someone who people may not think about, but Brene Brown. Especially when you're talking about the leadership space, just in general across any organization, the way that she thinks about leadership is, I think, extremely important, especially when you talk about how that impacts tech. Because one of the things that I think is that in order for diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism to really become a part of an organization, that vulnerability has to be important. Failing forward has to be important. Transparency in honoring what's happening in the background, just that real openness. And in the tech world, that can be challenging, right? Because it is so hard, fast moving all the time. There's not a lot of room for error. You can get run over if you're not really careful within an organization. Oh, yeah. And it's a startup world, and then startups are like very lean. People are doing a ton of work. You burn out, you go somewhere else, right? So it's
Tell me about it, Kim. Tell me about it.
And so because of that, it has not created a space of vulnerability. And the only way that you can really make sure that this work is taking, like I call it like medicine, you have to have a certain environment for medication to even work. And if it's going to be prescribed, and really, if it's going to work for an organization, you have to start there. And a lot of people and companies don't want to talk about that. So those are 4 folks that I would say, for different reasons, maybe we're not exactly talking about tech, but in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism space, as well as leadership, workplace culture space, those are 4 folks that I immediately think about, folks, following. And if you can get them on your show, then you owe me
All right.
instructions to each and every one of them.
So now I got to do the work. Get these folks, and they give. Okay, all right, I got you. All right, touche. Awesome. So they are all on the radar. I've been trying for Dr. Tiffany. So Dr. Tiffany, will you please come on the program? Everybody keeps saying that you're the perfect person. So I know you're busy. You're writing lots of books and book tours and all that kind of stuff. But I think your insight would be valuable and would help our community. So
she has blue hair. Yeah. Like who's not great that they can rock blue hair?
I know. And it's just like, so that's all right. I'm gonna keep working at her publicist. She's like, you gotta talk to my booking person. I'm like, all right, cool. I will do.
Again.
So where can we find out more information about your company? This is a great time. Any shameless plugs that you've got? No
shame. Find me at kimcrowderconsulting.com. You can also find me, look me up on LinkedIn, Kim Crowder. You can look me up on Instagram. I am Kim Crowder. I am Kim Crowder on Twitter. And then tons of podcasts. Those are listed on the website. But HubSpot, I really did a really great episode, The Growth Show, with them. Been in the New York Times, been in Forbes. Nexus Communication just released a podcast with me on it. I'm everywhere. Google me, you'll find me. But really the biggest thing is this. I just want to encourage people to understand that this work is a process. This work is lifelong work. You will not get it off of one training. You will not get it off of 1 year. You've got to be invested year over year, 2 feet in, and be okay with the fact that you're going to mess up sometimes. You won't always get it right. And frankly, the landscape is continuously changing so that it can learn and grow and be more inclusive. And so understand that you'll have to do this on a regular basis. There are plenty of great podcasts out there to learn from. A lot of great folks. Just find out who connects with you and what you want to do, and lean into this work and be really committed to doing it for yourself and not necessarily for another group of people. It makes you a better person. It makes you a better leader. It makes you a better global citizen.
Absolutely. I love that. All that cultural competence stuff, or just like, you're going to be good. This is going to make you better. Yes. As a human. So, all right, Kim, this is the toughest question of them all. Saved it for the end. What have you been snacking on lately? What's your favorite snack?
Oh, what's my favorite snack? You know what I like. So I am from Houston, and in Houston, there is a lot of Mexican influence. I like chile mangoes, like the fried ones.
With that little red chili powder sauce on it. Oh.
Even you can do that with a fresh mango, where you put the chili on it and you put lime, and then you can put salt on it if you'd like. I love that the juxtaposition between salty and sweet is like my jam. Savory and sweet, salty and sweet.
That is a phenomenal. I mean, so my wife will do that. My wife will she'll go buy the mangoes, and then she'll peel them and get them to the point where it's just, you got the meat part, and then she's got the red stuff that she sprinkles on it.
The red stuff.
The stuff. I don't know what it is. All I know is it's the stuff, and it tastes right. So it's good. Like it. So that is a good one. That is a good snack. So thank you so much for coming on the program, Kim. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
The San Diego Code School is a proud sponsor of the SnackWalls podcast. The San Diego Code School is leading companies to tech equity. The Tech-Enabled Apprenticeship Program is a venture whose heart is to do a lot of social good and do good work. You can help San Diego Code School secure funding for change by hiring developers, bringing a team in to relieve your backlog, or becoming a program sponsor. You can visit us on the web for more information at http://sdcs.io.